about yourself, Corey. Tell me what you got going on. Tell me what's, where you've been. Tell me what you're doing now.
Sure. So, Corey Woods, mayor of Tempe, Arizona. I've been mayor now since July 2nd, so a little over 3 months. I tell people it's always a very interesting time to be in political governance. Obviously, given the global pandemic of COVID-19, which I unfortunately, got right before I got sworn in. So that was also a very interesting experience, not only dealing with the pandemic from a governing standpoint, but also someone who had it. Fortunately for me, I tested negative on July 15th, so it's really been out of my system for, almost 3 months now. So I'm feeling great. Just actually got back from the gym, so I'm doing just fine, happy, healthy, can't complain about anything. But everything is good. I mean, I'm just still working on everything in the city of Tempe, from, dealing with the pandemic, of, trying to find ways to create more affordable housing opportunities to retain the diversity of what Tempe is, working on our challenges when it comes to homelessness. I just started the new public safety task force to look at how to reimagine policing in the city of Tempe and throughout the valley. So I got a whole lot going on right now, but it's an interesting but an exciting time to be in government.
Nice. And congrats on being the first African American mayor of Tempe. Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Appreciate
Awesome. Awesome. Brian, I was talking with you a couple of weeks ago about, what's going on in Tempe, what's the changes, of course, with COVID-19, Arizona State University. And, we got Shelley coming on. Shelley!
Hi.
Oh, she repping ASU too? Speak of the devil. Sun devil, right? Nice. Hey, Shelley, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining Apolitical. Hey, I know you just came on, but tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us like where you're from, what you're doing, where you've been. Let the audience know a little bit about who you are.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Shelley Jackson. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am from South Phoenix, Arizona. Born and
Outside?
raised. Yeah, born and raised outside. Still living on the south side too. So these are where my roots are. I love this community so much. In terms of current ventures, I'm currently running for Roosevelt School Board here in South Phoenix, Arizona. A little bit about that and how that came to be. As I said, I grew up here in South Phoenix and actually ended up going to high school in Tempe. So I went to Tempe Union High School. And
Yes.
What was interesting about that experience is we ended up going there because my sister said she wanted to go to Tempe because they were coming to the south side and recruiting people. And we lived right down the street from South Mountain. And she was like, that school is way too big. I am antisocial. I'm not going to South. And so.
Oh, no, don't say that. How can you be on the south side, not go to south?
Just tear it out.
I know. My mom was heartbroken too because everybody else in the family went to South. But since she went to Tempe, I had to follow my sister and my other cousins who ended up going there. And so what was interesting though was we ended up going there because my sister wanted to go, but later on we actually recognized the difference in education and the gaps in education from South Phoenix to some of our East Valley schools. Even though Tempe High was only about 5 to 6 miles away, right, a 20-minute drive, depending on how you're getting there. I recognized that the resources were there, right? There were teachers who were like always in the classroom and books that were not falling apart. And that was something that unfortunately I didn't experience in my last few years going to school on the South Side. And so I think that's where my awakening started to happen of just the lack of resources and who gets stuff and who doesn't get stuff. And I kept that, and I kept that in my heart as I went on to ASU. So go Sun Devils. As I went on to ASU, and I actually majored in dance for 3.5 years before I switched my major to community advocacy and social policy. And I switched my major because I went to Panama one summer for dance and was out there teaching with other teachers from the United States. And they were telling me about all of these resources for the arts that were available in Arizona. And they were mad about it, like they were jealous. And I was like, where? Because I have never seen these resources that you're talking about. And so I actually came back to the US pretty fed up, mad at the world, mad at institutions and everybody involved. And so that's when I actually changed my major got involved into education, got involved in organizing, and I've been organizing and working in education spaces ever since. And so I worked on voting rights, equitable education, expanding public transportation, training young folks to get involved just like me. And so that's what led me here today. Still organizing, still in education spaces, and now trying to make a difference on the Roosevelt School Board. So that was a lot, but that's where I'm at right now.
I'm glad you told that story. You know what I mean? Because I think it's very important for people to understand that making that transition is important to kind of know from what it is that you think that you want to do to what it is that you're passionate about, and understanding the importance of its impact. Because that's all anybody wants to be able to do, right? Is be able to have impact and be positive change in our society. So it's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, and welcome to Apolitical, both of you guys, because we want to talk about some things that we're seeing a surgence of young, new Black leadership in politics, especially in Arizona, which is exciting, right? And we want to kind of get a little bit more detailed in that, because this is something that I know for me, I'm a native, and Shelley, you're a native too as well. You usually didn't see back 20 to 25 years ago, right? Like I said, Corey, the first Black mayor of Tempe. I'll be honest with you, Corey. When I seen that, I say, you know what? There's a guy. Because I've been many times like, Tempe? Really? Black mayor?
Being honest, right?
Being honest. No, just Tempe. Tempe's a cool place, Mill, went to issue and everything else. But, let's be honest. It wasn't even thought of. It wasn't even like imaginable, because even though you may have city councilmen that may be African-American, but really a mayor, right? So I was kind of ask you guys some questions, like what inspired you become community leaders? I mean, because we need to try to duplicate this process, and we need to try to encourage not just people to be politicians, or not even be, I guess, run for office, but just be engaged and just be like, I want to be an activist. I want to make this part of my legacy. What made you guys want to be community leaders in just in general?
I was going to ask you if I could even make a comment about what you just raised about, me being an elected official in Tempe, because it kind of connects to that a little bit. So when I was elected to the city council in Tempe back in 2008, when I was 29 years old, many people look at me and think I'm still 29 years old, but I'm a lot older than that now.
Hey, black don't crack, bro. Black don't crack.
Exactly. I
apologize for that. Don't apologize for that, man.
Hey, no, it's all right. I tell people all the time. I mean, it's, when I was first running, as a matter of fact, I had a good friend of mine who was saying to me, and they were not saying this in any way, shape, or form to be offensive. They were saying because they were trying to help. They knew I wanted a career in public service, and they said to me, Corey, you do understand that the city of Tempe has been around for well over 100 years, and they have never had an African-American city council member. And do you think this is the kind of place where you want to run, or would you possibly rather run in a place maybe like South Phoenix, where there's a higher concentration of African-Americans and Latinos and people who look like you, and you might have more of an ability to get elected? Because here, it hasn't really happened so far. Now, I don't know if this was, foresight or arrogance on my part, because I can't look back, 13, 14 years. But my perspective at the time was, look, this is the place that I've chosen to make my home. And eventually someone is going to win who looks like me. So why not me? But that was basically what I thought, that was sort of what motivated me. And interestingly enough, I was talking on another kind of panel this morning about, I was running in 2008 at the time that Barack Obama was chasing the Democratic, nomination for president. And I remember at the time thinking, if this man can become president of the United States or even win the Democratic nomination for president, there's no reason why I can't become a city council member in Tempe, Arizona. Just seeing him even campaigning and running for that position gave someone like me a lot of hope that I could achieve a dream that I had had since I was 8 years old. With all of that, I ended up becoming the first African American city council member in Tempe history, and the first African American mayor in Tempe history now at the age of 41. So that it's not totally to your question, but it does talk about some of what you referenced about what gives you the confidence to think that you can break through a barrier or shatter some kind of glass ceiling. And I mean, I would first say it was my parents and my brother who always told me, Corey, you can do whatever you want to do. You are just as smart as anybody else, and if you put your mind to something, you can get the job done. So I mean, having a strong family support system in my corner has always been tremendously helpful. But I mean, but I always say, seeing someone like President Obama, in his quest to become president, gave me a lot of hope and gave me a lot of confidence that I could also break through that glass ceiling.
It's awesome, man. Like, it makes me think of different times where we put limits on what's imaginable when we have a vision, whether we're talking about our own personal future or the future of the community, that we have to be realistic, right? We have to, maybe we're pushing the envelope there. Let's compromise our vision and do something that's a little bit easier, more manageable. But that's your story kind of speaks to being brave, being bold, and knowing who we are and what we want and being committed to that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And just one quick thing, and I want to then make sure Shelley and I do an equal time here. Even kind of talking about being brave, I thought of something else when you said that. I mean, my run for mayor, I left the city council after 8 years in July of 2016. And I, made the decision. I just wanted to just be a normal person again. I didn't want to be in politics for, because I mean, most people in my spot, we're not independently wealthy or have a trust fund to kind of, lean on. I had to work a full-time job and be a city council member. And so after 8 years of that, I just said, man, I really want to just be normal and have my nights and my weekends to myself and not be working 60 plus hours a week. And always have my email blowing up. But, I made the decision after a couple of years out that I really wanted to get back in and take a shot at becoming mayor, which for a lot of people, they would say, once you're not on council anymore, you're not in the system, you lose some of the benefit of being a council member. That people go, well, the people who are the big money people or the folks in the game go, I don't need Corey's vote on a Thursday night, so I'm not going to write him a check because I don't need to write him a check. I'm going to write the current mayor a check because he's the one who's there who can decide the fate of what I've got going on. And I had a lot of folks who told me, Corey, I don't know if this is a really good idea because, an African American's never been elected mayor before. You're running against a person who is an incumbent mayor who's been mayor for nearly 8 years, whose father was, the most, possibly the most influential, popular elected official in city of Tempe history. And are you sure that you can actually do that? And I just said, look, at the end of the day, this is what I want to do. I think the time is right for me. It's nothing personal against the man that I'm running against. I like him. I served with him on council, but I live in a city without term limits. And so that means that a person can just, can sit there, for almost, in perpetuity. And I just made a decision that, look, I've only been gone for a couple of years. The people of the city still know who I am and have, high regard for my ability. I just think that the times are changing and there's a time for new leadership and different ideas and a different vision. And a lot of people were like, I don't know. But then, when I ran and then we won by such a convincing margin, there were people who called me that night and sent me text messages and said, hey, I was clearly wrong. Like, you knew something that I didn't. But, obviously, kudos to you, Corey, for simply having the bravery to say, look, this is, I think I've got what it takes to do this, and I'm just going to put myself out there. We're going to see what happens.
Yeah, and Shelley, what about you? And Corey, thank you for that. Because that broadens the picture out even from that question. But Shelley, I want to hear from you because you're from a younger generation, right? You're fresh out of college. You're doing, you're trying to do things around the community as well. Corey basically set the platform even for you to follow, right? What it sounds like. So what about you? Like, what motivates you to be a community leader? What drives you? And, and anything related to what Corey said regarding your passion, your confidence.
Yeah. So for context, I'm 24 years old. And I since I started getting into organizing or putting myself out there, I've always been the youngest in the room. And that, actually, I would say I've always been the youngest. More than likely, sometimes I'm the only Black person. And if we're getting even more specific, sometimes I'm the only woman in a space. So you put all those things together, and there's challenges just by my identity stepping into a room sometimes. And so I think for me, when I first started to get involved, a lot of people were annoyed with me because I feel like I was the person who always asked the hard questions that nobody wanted to answer, right? Like, okay, so we're doing this, but like, why wasn't this person included, right? Especially when it comes to things centered around young people or centered around Black people. We're doing this young person's town hall, but here I am in a room and everybody's like 50 and up. I'm like, okay, well then we're actually not like that. That's not empowering anyone. That doesn't make any sense. If we're saying that we're truly for the people that we're creating this event for, then they need to be at the table making these decisions. And I've always been the one to like ask those hard questions, and people got mad, right? Like that pushed me out of meetings sometimes. That made my teachers mad sometimes, both in college and when I was younger, right? And so I think that I've always been that person, and I thank the people in my community and my family for allowing me to ask those questions, right? Because when you get permission to question things at a young age, it gets a lot easier when people start to push you out, or when folks act like your voice doesn't matter. And so I think I learned really early when I was 21 and 22, starting to be in these spaces, that like, okay, I'm gonna have to ruffle some feathers and be okay with it, right? It's either gonna be okay with it and like continue being brave, or like shut up and know that like I'm gonna be killing myself inside and probably not doing justice for my community. And so I think once I realized that, I started to get sometimes more strategic. Sometimes that means I didn't mention my age, right? Like simply just like not mentioning my age. Sometimes it meant getting in the room and then mentioning my age and like letting people be mad. But I think for me, I learned really quickly that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not be complicit in whatever is happening. And I just ran with it. And when I think about the fire that lit in me, I think it was one, being mad, like just being straight up angry at the system. Like there were times where like I can look back to specific killings of Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown and things like that, and those things making me really angry and frustrated inside and feeling like I wasn't doing enough. And then I can also think back to having, for example, Representative Boating, who is like my mentor, who was a teacher at my school growing up, and seeing him in office, right? I went to Tempe High, and so Corey, you were also a city council member. I remember you coming and talking about sister cities and things like that, right? And so
Circle of life. Circle of life.
I feel so old all of a sudden. Like, what happened?
All that you see before you belongs to you now. All that you see before you belongs to you.
And so everything just comes around, you know? But I will say that, like, having even the people who I grew up with, we all look to Boating, right? Because he was a teacher at our school. We're like, oh, he's down. Like, if there's one politician that I trust in the world, it's him, right? And if there's one reason that I know I can do it, it's because he did it, right? And so I think that, going back to Corey's point, being able to see yourself in someone else and see your experiences within that person lights a fire in you and lets you know that, like, okay, this is possible and this is something that's real. But also just being brave and bold and knowing that, like, sometimes we have to create our own paths. And I think that was something that I was lucky that the people around me never, like, sometimes people told me, oh, you can't do that, or you can't do this, like, you can't combine dance and social justice. And here I am working with Rising Youth Theater and the ACLU on the school push out, right? And the school to prison pipeline. There have been people who have said that you can't do this at a certain age, or you can't do this while running. And it's the audacity to say, yes, I can, right? Like, and I think it goes back to your point, Brian, of like remembering who you are and remembering your people and what your people have went through before you. And I know for me, that keeps me going a lot. And I know that I have personally felt really invested in young people because I'm young, and I wish that I had someone who was 24, who was like a little bit older to have like known a little bit, but like they not like all the way up there, so they don't know everything. So they're close in age with you to know enough. But they also still understand you on a different level. And so I have mentees who are 18 years old, like 17, 21. And I'm like, I wish I had someone who was 24, 25 when I was that age to say like, no, you can do it. Or to see someone who is like treading their own paths in these other ways. And so I think one is like the people who have came before me and have paved the way play a huge part in why I keep going. And then the folks who are coming up behind me who are watching me, and they're watching my every move and seeing how I respond to things, seeing how I move throughout the world and how I make certain decisions, and knowing that they're watching me keeps me in check, because that's who I'm accountable to, right? Like I'm accountable to the young folks who are watching me. I'm accountable to South Phoenix and my community, and that keeps me in check, and that reminds me that we got work to do, right? Like we're not here to sit around, we've got work to do, and the people who came before us did it, so that means that we can do it too.
And can I tell you, as a homeowner in South Phoenix, as a person who's invested in South Phoenix, I'm deeply proud of that example that you're setting and what that means to me as I have, like, I'm forming roots in this community. And my wife and I are thinking about, raising a family here. And I think it's really important for us to kind of think about the things that are happening around us as we're looking to do those type of things, and know what extension of us kind of belongs in that community, knowing what it is that I believe in, the things that are valuable to me, and not just, all the amenities that certain neighborhoods might offer, but what it offers in terms of what can we build here? What are the things that we can build that go beyond buildings, that physical places, but in terms of more of a sociological thing? Can we build something here that's going to be so unique and so brave that its light shines more distinctly than in other places, and has nothing to do with, us having the biggest buildings or the most profound, locations that people identify as being like, cultural spaces, but people know that there's something unique about what's happening in a South Phoenix, or something unique that's happening in Levine, and they want to be a part of it.
Love that. And I think that something that Corey touched on is like, I think when you're in a space, specifically in public service where you're running for office, is like, of course, people who have been in there for a while are going to tell you certain things or come up with their own predictions on how things are going to go. And I'm running as a write-in candidate. Because there's only one person on the ballot, but there's actually 3 open seats. And what's interesting, it's the most 2020 race ever, y'all. So if you ever you needed a race to describe what 2020 is like, it's this one right here. There is one.
Oh, yeah, it's going down today. It's going down today. Right, I hear you. Side.
One person on the ballot, 3 open seats, and I'm running with my colleague Alexis Aguirre, but there's actually 2 other write-in candidates who are Trump supporters. And if that doesn't tell you a little bit also about South Phoenix and its makeup now, and how it's shifting and changing, and how, folks are maybe coming in who don't have the deep roots and values that South Phoenix has always had, like, I think that that's something to know. I also think that we have to recognize, when we think about our communities, how things shift and move around, right? Because South Phoenix looked a lot different 10 years ago and 20 years ago, right? And so people also told me like, hey, this race is gonna be harder for you, because even though this is South Phoenix, Black residents have been pushed out, and a lot of them are now in Levine, and there's a lot of anti-Blackness here in this community that you know and love. The results have shown in the last few elections that it's actually harder for Black people to run here now. And so, again, going back to that audacity, right? Because people are saying, this is gonna be hard, or are you sure you wanna do this? Or, too young, too Black, too woman. And I think for me, it's been like, I can acknowledge and hold all those things, right? Like I can hold that my family has deep roots here, and that Black people have deep roots here, and they still deserve to be represented. I can also hold and acknowledge and recognize the truth that yes, there is a more a Latinx population that is moving in, and they also deserve to be heard and represented. But I can also acknowledge that people who are saying make our schools great again don't hold the same values that has historically been here for South Phoenix, and we deserve to have people who represent us who can bring forth a new vision, as you were saying, Brian, right? Like, not even going back to saying this is how it was, but saying what can it be? When we have people who can actually dream and look past the reality of what things can look like for our students and our community, like at large. So